You're listening to the My Simplified Life podcast, and this is episode number 124. Welcome to the My Simplified Life podcast, a place where you will learn that your past and even your present don't define your future. Regardless of what stage of life you're in, I want you to feel inspired and encouraged to pursue your dreams, simplify your life, and start taking action today. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac, and I'm excited to share my stories and life lessons with you while taking you on my own journey. This is My Simplified Life. Hi all, welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac. When we think of clutter, we tend to think about all the stuff that's accumulated in our homes and closets and garages. But what about the clutter that is taking up space in our mind, our soul, and our thoughts? The clutter that's inside of us. Today is the official book launch day for Unclutter Your Soul, and author Trina McNeilly is joining me to discuss how we can observe, own, and overcome the clutter that is taking up space inside of us. I love the premise of this book because whether we want to believe it or not, we've all had experiences that are clogging up our path to moving forward. Trina provides guidance from her own experience and practical steps, such as meditations, throughout the book to help readers unclutter their souls. Hi, Trina.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to chat with you because I love any author. Honestly, it is a labor of love to write a book. So congratulations. Today, your book comes out.
Thank you. Yes, I know. It is definitely a labor of love to write a book. It's a long process.
It is. I know. I'm going through it right now, so I fully understand. Can you take a moment to introduce yourself to everyone, please?
Yes. So I'm Trina, and this is always the hardest question in the world for me, but I'll just start with the basics. I'm a mom to 4 kids. 2 are teenagers and 2 are like middle school age. So everything is crazy at home in my life. I've been blogging for over a decade. My blog is called Lala Lovely. And my first book is called Lala Lovely, The Art of Finding Beauty in the Everyday. It originated as a lifestyle blog. I love design and decor and all things home. And then my latest book is Unclutter Your Soul, Overcome What Overwhelms You, which is also really written through the lens of home and the idea that I know we'll get into it, but just preview idea that, we have a living home within us.
I love that. And I love, let's just talk about the book. And tell me, I'm probably tripping it up on the order it comes in, but
That's okay.
owning, overcome, say it for me. It's owning, overcoming, and observing, but I know that's not the order it goes in.
Close. So the book is divided into 3 sections, and they all start with O. So it's observe, own, and overcome. And so this idea of uncluttering our souls, I always want to kind of define what I mean by the word soul, because, it's a beautiful word. We kind of interchange it for your heart or your spirit, but your soul, at least the way in my research and how I define it, and what I mean in this book, is the compilation of your mind, your will, and your emotions. So when I wrote my first book, I had a chapter in there called Mental Clutter, which was one of my favorite chapters. And same idea, we have all this stuff cluttering up our minds. And in fact, I had a publisher make me an offer to write a book called Mental Clutter. And I was so torn. I wanted to write it so bad, far more than I wanted to kind of, write Lala Lovely for whatever reason. But it kind of came down to the point that I didn't feel like I could give the reader what they needed, and I'd be doing them a disservice because I was still so much working on that in my own life. And so as that book came out, I was kind of in the process of learning what it means to unclutter my soul. And I found that it went far beyond just my mind and having a busy mind, and it was my emotions. I was kind of emotionally out of control in my life and my will. So that's what I mean by uncluttering the soul. And then that process, there's so many, each chapter is kind of an action step, which is great, but it's broken down into the idea of we have to observe, like really observe what's going on the inside of us and pay attention. And then we have to own all of our junk, kind of like when you're decluttering a home, right? You might open a door to the basement or to your attic and then be just like, oh my gosh, this is too much. Like, I just want to shut the door. But we have to go through all the boxes. We have to look at what's really there. And that takes time, so that we can own it. We can say, is this serving me in my life? Or have I been hoarding this emotion or whatever it is? Have I been hoarding the soul clutter? What's my complicity in it? And then overcome, because we all actually have the power to do that, even when we feel powerless. And we can talk more about that. And I talk about it in the book, because if you have a lot of soul clutter, I can guarantee you feel powerless and completely overwhelmed, and you just don't know where to start. Or you start and you think, this is too big for me to do on my own. And that's what I hope to do, is to come alongside readers and to your listeners, and to help, because it's a journey and a process, and to help people know they're not alone.
And I think it's such a great analogy of the clutter, because that's all we hear about is, the clutter in our home and our
Yeah.
closets and all of this. And, to me, when I look at clutter, like if the kitchen counter has stuff on it, homework papers and,
Yeah.
backpacks, there's an anxiety that builds up. And I'm like, oh, I just need the clean space. Like, just
Yeah.
put it away. And it's obviously something that's internal in all of us as well. And it's work. It's, I see a therapist. I love her to death.
Mhm.
And, that is work that we have to do. That's hard work. That
Yeah.
it's work that you sometimes might want to avoid because it
Yeah.
is so hard. And I think that there's also a lot of us don't realize that there's been traumas in our lives. Like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't come to you and say, oh, I had a traumatic childhood. That's not what I would say. But
Yeah.
when I share my full story, like I have with my therapist, she's like, yeah, you did.
Right.
And, you have to recognize that. And you should put a label on it, because it's something you've overcome.
Mhm.
And, you're working towards not repeating cycles in it as well.
Right. Yeah. I think that's true for so many. And I talk a little bit about trauma in the book, as I have a chapter where it's called Inventory Your Clutter. And so I'm just naming different types of clutter. It's not an exhaustive list, but I'm naming some of my own and some big ones. And what I found was that there's two types of trauma. There's small t trauma, which would be kind of like you're talking about, childhood things, different events that we go through that we never would have really labeled trauma. And then there's big T trauma, which is more of the obvious ones, like, a car accident or abuse, things like that. So for me, that was like a really big thing for me to discover was, wow, I have had trauma in my life. And I didn't know it until my body kind of began to show me that, because every time I talked about a situation that was definitely a defining one in my life, my body reacted a certain way. And then it was a therapist that said, well, that's because it's trauma. And I didn't like that label. But once I had that label, like you're saying, um, then I knew I could do something with it and with that pain and with that issue. But if we aren't aware, if we're not observing these things, then we can't overcome them.
And it becomes something that's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Why are we uncomfortable talking about this or seeking that help, when ultimately it's going to better us in the end? It'll make us better human beings. We'll be able to love others more, love ourselves more. And I think it's so important that we do this work for ourselves. We deserve it.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. We absolutely do. And because when we, take care of ourselves, then we can help take care of others and help others. But if we don't, it's like that very obvious analogy of, when you're on the plane and they say to put your oxygen mask on first, so you can help your child or others. Same thing with what's going on the inside of us and our souls.
So how did this come about? Like, you obviously had written this chapter on mental clutter and, were on this journey yourself. How did you come up with the 3 O's? It reminds me of Out of Office. So
Oh yeah. Really, it just was a kind of an organic process for me. And most of my writing is because I journal. I know that's not for everybody, but I kind of have to write and process things that are going on in my life. So my books always kind of start in my journal. And it just kind of came. I was really stuck. I don't even want to call it stuck. I felt stuck in my life, but I noticed that I was observing so much. It's naturally my personality. I am an Enneagram 4. I'm very aware of surroundings. I pay attention, and just what you do as a writer anyways. But I felt stuck in that. And I was coming up against, some people that were well-meaning, but just not really aware and would say things like, oh, it's time to get over this, or you've been dealing with this for a long time. And, it was kind of hurtful. But I began to think, oh, maybe I am. I'm not taking action. I wanted to, but I felt really immobile in, my pain and, anxiety and depression, like so many other people I'm sure can relate to. But at the same time, I was really observing and starting to kind of decode patterns in my life by paying attention. So to me, it was a really slow process of change, but this was vital information that I thought, if I hadn't known this, how could I even know the step to begin to take action? So, I guess I just kind of was doing it organically. And then once I understood that paying attention precedes change, I was really more empowered to begin to take action. And so I think it just was this organic process. I'm a person of faith, so I felt really kind of led in this process, but to begin to own. And so in my own inner life, I felt, in my faith, I would say like convicted, or you may have intuition, if you're not a person of faith, that now it's time to you've been observing, but what part maybe have you played in this? Some of this is totally out of your control. My parents went through a divorce after nearly 40 years of marriage, and it kind of started this awful spiral in my life. I was living in my childhood home with my children and family, and it's just like my world as I knew it kind of fell apart. Grandparents began dying. It was just like Pandora's box. And so most of that was like totally out of my control. Like I couldn't help that was happening. But it got to a point where I had to look and say, like, what can I take ownership of? Like, I'm dealing with chronic stress, but could I in any way be like perpetuating this? Am I trying to go to sleep on time? Am I eating foods that nourish my body? Am I spiraling into a victim mindset? And for me, I had to tell myself the truth. And the answer to those questions and many more were yes, yes, and yes. There are things that we face in life that happen to us, and we find ourselves in situations where we have very little choice. And so we feel so powerless. And it came down to me kind of understanding like, well, I can choose my attitude, and I can choose to take a shower today. I mean, I got down to I had to get down to the nitty gritty, and it still felt really like powerless. I felt like a child at times. But when I began to make those choices, I started taking action and owning. And so that, I don't know, I'm all over answering this long question, but
no,
this was kind of
I love
organic.
it. Yeah.
And I like alliteration. So I found the right alliteration words to go with the process I organically went through.
Well, I also love the part in the book where you and your husband go on this amazing trip to Holland
Uh-huh.
and you feel fantastic. You're like, yes, life is great. And you come home and you feel renewed. And then you only realize, like, oh, nothing's changed. Like, just because I was gone,
Right.
across the world didn't change anything at all. And I think that that's a great recognition that, we can't just run away from it. Whatever's bothering us, whatever's cluttering our lives, our souls, it's going to be there until we actually deal with it.
Yeah, that it's so right. And if you read the book, you'll see the theme that I want to run away. I've been using that coping mechanism since I was a child, but I want to escape, or I want someone else to rescue me. And it really got to this point of realizing that nobody can rescue me except kind of myself.
Mm-hmm.
I say God and then myself. So, because I'm the only one that can make changes in my life, even if you're a person of faith, God can't make that change for you. You still have to make the choice. So, yeah, it was interesting because at that point, I kind of knew this observing process. So I really paid attention and I thought, isn't this amazing? Like, I feel so different and alive there. And then, you come back and you're like, oh, it's all still waiting, because we can never, run away from ourselves. The whole time I write about this in the book, I wanted to move. Maybe that would help. And interestingly, in the story, it kind of progresses. I was moving. I ended up moving out of that childhood home, which was extremely painful process for me and a really big loss. Um, and thinking maybe, I just need to get out of Dodge altogether.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, I did end up moving. We moved recently, like in June, out of state to Tennessee from Illinois. But it was the timing of it. And it was, I reached a place then where I knew, like, I can't run away from problems and from pain because they come with you. So I really had to deal with that. And there's still things that I am dealing with. I have a different scenery, which is actually nice and sometimes really helpful if you've gone through some really big things. But I still have to do the hard work to, observe, own, and overcome.
And not to make light of it, but you do mention throughout the book that you would go in the closet and play Candy Crush.
Yes.
And I laughed because I went, I didn't know that was an option.
It's an option. Yeah. But then after you do it for so long, like, and your kids know where you are, then it's not a good option because they find you.
My closet's for the podcast, so they're not allowed in here if the door is
Right?
closed. Yes.
See, that's good. I know. Yes. Yeah. I would. That was another coping mechanism. That was another thing I kind of had to own, was like, again, it was a running. I couldn't run far, but
Mm-hmm.
I went to the closet and would kind of fall apart in there. And then after, I got a little stronger, then it turned to disassociating by playing Candy Crush. But then I kind of learned, and I write about it in the book, that it's not like way off to use like a game, more brain games are better, but there's actually science behind it that takes us out of this loop of, like when you're having a spike in cortisol or something really bad happen, like, acute stress, it just boom comes on. And then you want to stay in it and ruminate. And then that all of those bad, hormones stay in your body. So there's a reason we want to do that, but there's just, healthier and better ways to do that. So I've taken that, not Candy Crush anymore. But I've reached a level I can't pass. Now I do like
Now
word
it's Wordle.
No, can you tell me what Wordle is, please?
No, I cannot because I have not played it.
Okay. I'm
I
just
just
like,
see it in my Twitter feed nonstop, and I'm like, wow, it must be nice.
I keep seeing it now, and I'm like, I feel left out. Like I'm like, I guess I'm not a cool kid because I don't know what this is, and it seems like other people are playing it together. What's going on? But I seriously was going to go Google it tonight and try to figure it out. But
the closest I've seen was Saturday Night Live did a sketch last weekend where they had the guy playing Donald Trump, and he came on and did the whatever his association was, and that made a word and this made a word, and that was it. And there you go. And I went, okay, I still don't get the game.
That's funny. I might have to look that skit up. But yeah, so but I like word games and then Tetris. There's actually some research behind the game Tetris, which I was like, well, that's great because I'm a child of the 80s. So I love playing Nintendo. So now sometimes I call it a bridge. And if I do want to run off, I stop myself and I'm like, is this, for me, overcoming with that situation means that I stay and have a hard conversation or, don't run off. But sometimes, each situation is different. Maybe I do need to go cool off for a minute. And if that's the case, then sometimes I do go sit for 15 minutes, not in my closet, in my bedroom. I'm making, change and progress is steps, and we have to celebrate the progress. It's not about being perfect or reaching some, extreme high level. But I'll go sit in my room with my iPad maybe and, play Tetris or some word game for like 15 minutes. I don't set a timer, but I watch the time. And then I make myself like return back to family life and not hibernate. And because for me that I would just spiral. Then you start ruminating and then I'll go into self-pity. Who wants to admit that? But I
It's
will.
better than doom scrolling.
Oh, well, that's a thing for me too. Yes.
Yeah. So you want to avoid it, then let me just go see what everyone else is doing. And then, that's not what my life looks like, even though that's really not what their life looks like either. Right. But then you go down this whole comparison trap and it's worse. So play Tetris instead.
Yeah. And what you're doing when you doom scroll, and I get it, I do it. Like I'm in definitely a season right now where I'm having to catch myself just doing that because, some things that I'm facing are really hard. So it's just like, oh, that's a quick way to disengage. But I'm not really engaging with people online. I'm just looking at all their stuff and doom scrolling. So it's not, I don't even want to call it a temptation, but the action to do that is kind of a normal process to get out of, the hard thing that you're dealing with, but it's not the right thing. So, if you find yourself doom scrolling, maybe download Tetris or Solitaire or, a word game and do that instead for 15 minutes and then put the phone down and do something else.
Or read a book.
Read a book. Yes.
That's what my 15 minutes is all about. I'm always reading something new.
Yes.
And in your book, we haven't touched on, you've mentioned that you are a woman of faith. And within the book, there are the action items at the end of meditating, reflecting, acting. And you mention, different parts of scripture that people can refer to. Not that you have to. I mean, there's reflection questions that are in here that don't have to do with God, but there are ones that do.
Right.
So it's that perfect bridge of if you don't want to touch it, don't read that part, like no big deal. But, there's things that you can meditate on, which to me isn't a religious action. It's getting to know yourself and getting inside yourself. And I think that's what your book is all about, discovering what's in your soul, what's cluttering it, what's going to free you to love yourself entirely and overcome whatever it is.
Yeah, for sure. I love in the back of each chapter, it's called Create Space. And so there is often a verse, if you are a person of faith. If not, mostly they're just encouraging words. And then some introspective questions and then an action item. A couple of them are simple prayers. A couple of them are super practical, like go do this, this, and that. But it's a lot of introspection, which this whole process of uncluttering your soul is. But yes, it's really for anyone, wherever you're at in your journey. If you're a person of faith, if you're not, you can read the parts that might be and look to your intuition. And really what we're trying to do when we think about meditate is, with soul clutter, mental clutter, whatever, what we do all the time is hyper focus on everything that's wrong and that could go wrong. We ruminate and we're trying to kind of shut that tap off. And, I talk about imagination in the book and how we're so good at using our imagination for bad. But what if we flipped that and used it for good? What if we imagined all of this space on the inside of us and we begin to visualize the wide open spaces and see what could go right instead of what could go wrong?
Yes. Get the negative Nelly stuff out of the way. That's what I always tell my kids. Don't be a negative Nelly. You
Yeah.
have to think positively. So,
Yeah.
teach them young.
Yeah. And sometimes I find, and this is in no way like I'm not trying to insult anyone because I'm insulting myself. I'm naturally a worrier, but it's just kind of the lazy thing to do because it's just easy. It's just, that's the way your mind. And in fact, I think I have some statistics in the book, but, science shows that naturally our brains go in a negative direction. So it takes like exercise, like mental exercise to think positively and to interrupt those negative thoughts because they're stories that we tell ourselves and we've been doing it for so long. It's like if you put a movie on and it just keeps replaying over and over and over in the background.
Mhm.
And so we can like hit pause and we can hit stop. And I'm going to date myself here. We can hit eject and like remove that VHS tape or
I'm
that.
with you. We still
Yes.
have a VCR downstairs. So
Yeah.
even my kids who are 5 and 6 know what a VCR is.
Yes, I love it. I know I still have VHS tapes too. But you can stop that. You can interrupt that. But it takes energy and it takes work and thoughtfulness to do that. But like anything, it's a muscle that you build.
And I think that also, when we talk about being a victim or, overcoming, it's not that we're saying, get over it.
Yeah.
It's really learning from it. There's so many things that can happen in someone's life. And I've interviewed a plethora of people who have had horrific events, whether it's someone has died in front of them, been shot,
Mhm.
like really traumatic things.
Yeah.
And it's not that they simply got over it, but they learned, okay, what is it that made me who I am today because of this event? Why am I this much stronger? Why am I now in this career path because of what happened to me? So taking it and putting that positive spin on it, we're all allowed to, for lack of better words, wallow for a
Mhm.
while and live in that time. But at the same time, we should learn from it as well.
Mhm.
I hope that makes sense. I don't want to come off as insensitive, to anyone or regarding any event in life. But I think it's important that we do reflect on, how something has made us who we are today and how we have become stronger in
Right.
that.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, you know, with your listeners, there are listeners that are actual really victims. They've been victims of abuse and horrific things, like you said. And I'm so sorry for anyone that's listening and that has had to endure such difficult things. It's not even easy to process those things because
Mhm.
when we go through trauma, a lot of times it's just like you actually do disassociate and it goes way back into the boxes, way into the basement. But when you do start to unpack those things and hopefully with a professional that can help you, then there comes a point where, at least in my life, this is my story, you have a choice set before you. And for me, it just wasn't serving me to always look through the lens of being a victim. um, and with my faith, in the Bible, it says, that God has called us overcomers, that we are victorious. So I want to look through that lens. It doesn't take away what's happened or negate that in any way. It's just saying, I don't want this to define me.
Mhm. Oh, I like that you put that much more eloquently than I did.
No, you said it great.
Well, I love the book. Thank you for joining me. Where can everyone find the book today? Because it is out in the world for everyone to buy.
Yay. Awesome. So you can find it wherever books are sold. So Amazon, Barnes and Noble. If you go, I forget all the names, but if you go to trinamcneilly.com /unclutter your soul, there's links to all of the sellers online to grab it. And if you order today, since it's release day, I've got some really great freebies that you can still take advantage of. And then you can find those on my website as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Trina, and congratulations.
Thank you. I've so enjoyed this conversation. Thanks for having me.
Friends, I think this book and our conversation is a great reminder of some of the things that might be holding us back from moving forward and discovering our purpose and going after it. I'm a big believer in therapy, and part of the work that goes into therapy is working on yourself. It's hard work for sure, but it's truly so worth it. I know that my life experiences have led me to be the person I am today, and some of those experiences I've had to learn and grow from. I've had to ensure that I don't continue patterns that were taught to me, and I have had to recognize the way I want my life to look in order to make those kinds of changes. That's truly what this show is all about. Knowing, understanding, and recognizing that your past and your present don't define your future. You do. You're in charge and you've got this. Take some time this week to reflect and unclutter your soul, your mind, your thoughts. We only have this one life to live, so let's make it the one we want to live. Observe your life, own your experiences, and overcome the obstacles.